important to him. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome former Chief Justice Frank Williams, renowned Lincoln scholar, into the Navigant Credit Union Go Local Broadcast Center.
Hi, Russ.
Hi,
Good
Chief.
to be
How you
with
doing?
you.
Excellent. Thank
Good
you
to
for
be
coming
with-
on.
Sure, glad to be here.
So, let's talk about this this donation that you have decided to make to the Mississippi State University of your own, you and your wife's own
Right.
personal Abraham Lincoln library.
Right, well, I've been collecting for 60 years, and when I married Virginia in 1976, she joined the fray. She's a Texan, so she puts the southern view into the collection.
Sure.
So we've been thinking for years as to where the collection should go, and we wanted it to go to a school which did not have a Lincoln or Civil War collection, and we decided on Mississippi State University.
That's interesting. That was one of my first questions I had for you, because I think a lot of people are wondering, you know, here you are, you've got this awesome, expansive, valuable collection of Abraham Lincoln artifacts and letters and obviously books. And you'd think that, a lot of people would think that maybe you should keep it local, you know, send it to maybe Brown University, somewhere at Providence College, somewhere around here. But like you said, you decided to send it to the South, Mississippi State University, and you said a big reason for that is to fill a void.
Yes, and they don't have a Lincoln and Civil War collection, of course, in the Deep South, but this is where we wanted it to go to help continue the reconciliation of our Civil War, because the Civil War, as I think you and your viewers will agree, did not end at Appomattox in April 1865. We're still going with a house divided, as
Sure.
Lincoln called it.
What do you mean by that? You think that there's still a little angst between the South and the North?
There's no
over-
question,
Okay.
and there's no question, and we've come a long way on race relations and civil liberties and civil rights, but we still have a ways to go to achieve the vision of the Declaration of Independence.
And you think that this donation to the Mississippi State University could bridge that gap in some small or perhaps large way?
Yes, and that's one reason why we chose Mississippi State. Secondly, to get back to your question, is why not local, or why not the hometown, Lincoln's hometown in Springfield, Illinois?
Sure.
Well, they already have Lincoln materials there, and this would be like bringing coal to Newcastle, which was a big coal mining area. So we wanted a place that, in the South, the Deep South, and a place that did not have a Civil War or Lincoln collection, so that students, faculty, researchers, staff, visitors can use it. And much of it will be put online. Digitization is wonderful. And this is a massive collection.
I was going to speak to that. The folks down at Mississippi State, they must be absolutely thrilled to be getting their hands on this collection, because, I mean, this thing is estimated to be worth somewhere around $3 million.
Right.
So this is an incredibly generous donation on your part.
Thank
so they
you.
must be thrilled to have it, and I'm sure it's going to do a lot for the university and its marketability.
I think so. Just keep in mind that what we collected over the years, 12,000 books and pamphlets,
Wow.
and 17,000 everything else, Jaws and Jim Cracks, ephemera, paintings, sculpture,
Okay.
coins, philately, stamps, campaign material.
Oh, wow.
Statuary, and so all of it went, and this company from Randolph, Mass. Came down to our home and 3 other locations, because we had no more room
Yeah, I can
to
imagine.
house this,
Sure.
and packed the collections, and it took them 2.5 weeks
Oh,
to
my
do it.
gosh.
And there were, like, I think 22 pallets containing 242 boxes, and all other the wooden crates for statuary. So it's a massive dumping that went to Stockville, Mississippi. They all have it now, and they're sorting it out. And we think that it will take them 2 years to get everything ready. Most of it's cataloged.
Okay.
They've got to convert it to digitization,
Okay.
and get some of these items online, the three-dimensional stuff. So 2 years, I think, before you can really use the collections.
Because they have to get it all sorted and organized and put
Correct.
together. Sure.
Correct.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because when you think of a library, I think when the average person thinks of a library, they think books, but it's interesting that you note it's so much more than books. It's
It
much
is.
more vast than that.
Well, it's good that you asked me this, Russ, because I started in the 6th grade in the Cranston Public Schools, the old Mechanicat Park Elementary School. And of course, we were placed in the seats alphabetically. Williams, last row, last seat. And I sat under a portrait of Lincoln, a full-length portrait engraving.
Wow.
And Mrs. Taylor, you always remember the good teachers. She was a mentor to me and others, and really kind of directed me towards U.S. history and Lincoln and the Civil War. So that's how this all started.
That was my next question. I was going to ask you, what is it about Abraham Lincoln? Because you're synonymous almost at this point with Lincoln. I mean, when I if I tell someone I'm going to be interviewing Frank Williams, it's almost like they won't say former Supreme Court Chief Justice. They'll say, oh, Lincoln scholar. I would think
Right.
you're almost as well known for that as you were for being a great lawyer and a great judge.
Thank you, and that's okay with me.
Sure,
Right?
I think
So-
and it is.
so-
I was going to ask you what got you down, and it was a teacher.
Yes, and
elementary school
and I looked at his face, this pine cone face, and was attracted to him. He's not the handsomest guy in the world, but the face was full of character.
Sure.
And I spent my lunch money, 25 cents a day, buying used Lincoln books, mostly paperback, of course. That's
Sure.
all I could afford in 1952. So that's how it started. And then things progressed, and I majored in history and government at Boston University, went into the service for 5 years, then went back to BU Law School, all the time collecting. And then, of course, the intensity of this picks up after I begin practicing law, so you can afford more and
More stuff,
and you
sure.
buy more, and so it's been a great adventure. But this was the time, Russ, and this was the place to send it. We developed a relationship with Mississippi State over the course of some years.
Okay.
So we have a lot of faith in the staff, and we're friends with the president and the first lady there. So, and I was instrumental in moving a Ulysses S. Grant collection from another university, because I head the U.S. Grant Association.
Okay.
We needed to move, and we moved it to Mississippi State in 2009.
From where?
From Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. So this was sort of like a pathfinder as to
Absolutely.
why we wanted our
they had the
Lincoln
interest.
collection. Exactly. And they built a gallery for us, the Frank and Virginia Williams Gallery of
Oh, wow.
Lincolniana, right next to a new gallery for the Ulysses S. Grant Presidential Library.
So as your wife, she took on a fascination with Lincoln over the years, just...
Well, I don't know if fascinated is the word. I think she
Interest.
tolerates it.
Oh, okay.
Because of me.
Right.
And she's been very supportive and very helpful in getting the artistic parts of the collection.
Sure.
Paintings, prints, statuary. So, and I was more the book and pamphlet guy.
Okay. So that's why the library is so expansive and so
Right.
diverse.
It is. It
Thanks
is.
to her.
It is.
Absolutely.
Now, I think you asked why not Rhode Island or Brown?
Absolutely.
Or why not Springfield?
That's right.
Illinois, the hometown. Well, they already have major collections on Lincoln and the Civil War.
Sure.
Brown has a great one, the McClellan, not the General McClellan, but the McClellan collection at the John Hay Library is about one of the finest in the world.
Okay.
Given to the university by John D. Rockefeller Jr. in the 1920s.
Sure.
And Springfield has its own Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. So this was the appropriate place
Sure.
to go.
So besides sitting under that painting and besides, a gradual buildup, what is it about Lincoln that fascinates you that you think most people don't know that they would find interesting?
Well, I think what impressed me the most at a very early age was his political courage, and I mean political in the best sense of the word.
Okay.
Because almost everything we do has some political connection. When you and I speak, or when I teach at the Naval War College, or at the law school, there's some connection. And then, of course, we're going through traumatic times with this current administration and Congress, and a house divided, as Lincoln called it, which is a divided nation with people on one side that are extreme and on the other that are just as extreme.
Sure.
And what we see in Lincoln is the ability to bring people together
Okay.
and to unify and redefine American democracy as it should be. We become the United States is, that is one, rather than the United States are many. So I think his work ethic, he's walking around the executive mansion, as the White House was then called, 2, 4 in the morning, trying to figure out how to prevail in the war, whether or not to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, and at the same time supporting a transcontinental railroad
Okay.
to the Pacific, a new Department of Agriculture, which of course was big, it still is a big industry now in our current culture, and getting the Morrell Land Grant College Act, which starts state universities
Okay.
that support education. So the man was just amazing in his ability to function and to bring people together, and that's what impressed me.
I think that maybe you would agree, but I think that that's something that we're missing in this day and age in our politics and our political culture. And I think that more Lincoln scholarship perhaps could lead to more collaboration and more working together and more results.
I think so, Russ. In fact, it's amazing to me, or maybe not so amazing, but since Lincoln's death in 1865, every president who's followed him in the White House has a bust of Lincoln in the office, the Oval Office,
Sure.
or a painting of him. And there's one in the East Room, and the State Dining Room has a great portrait of him. So they look to him as the standard bearer
Sure.
for what the office should be. And he did expand the powers of the presidency more than any other president till that time, because the war caused this mushrooming of federalism, of
States' right. Sure.
state and federal relations, and prior to the war it was primarily state-oriented.
Okay. So I guess my next question would be, you're retired at this point. You retired from the Corps in 2000.
I think 09 as the
09,
chief.
2009
But
as
I'm
chief.
failing in retirement,
Yeah,
as I've
explain.
told you.
I wanted to
because
ask
I
you-
keep showing up.
Sure, you keep showing. How many different colleges and universities would you say that you lecture at about Lincoln in any given year?
Well, maybe one a week on an
Oh my
average.
gosh.
But it's
Wow.
a little less since I stepped down as chief, because I would not only lecture on Lincoln, but also on the judiciary.
Okay.
So
So now
I
it's
still
just
go
Lincoln.
out, I still write papers and write books and articles, and because the interest is still there, and it will continue, I hope, as long as I am able. But my day job is really mediation and arbitration. And when I was the chief, we created an appellate mediation program for cases, civil cases coming up to the Supreme Court from the lower courts, had to go through mediation with a retired judge, and from any court. No charge to the litigants.
Okay.
No, they don't have to even order the transcripts. No fees to the judges, to the retired judges. And we resolve, this is the last gasp before they have to file briefs and have conferences and oral argument and await a decision, which could be risky,
This
right?
is one last try
This
before
is
it moves
exact-
into
that's
litigation.
right, exactly, before appeal.
Appeal,
To
excuse me.
effectuate the appeal. And we get about maybe 40 to 50% success ratio, which is
Pretty good.
Which is good. Remember, there's been a decision already handed down below in the trial courts. Now, compare this though to private mediation, which I also do.
Okay.
Going into a lawyer's office, using their conference room, the parties agree to the mediator. You spend a day, sometimes many days, 6 months alone on the Hewlett Packard Enterprise DMV software project, which is going live this week.
Right.
That's how long that took. Now that success ratio is about 95%.
95% of the cases
that I get resolved.
get resolved.
That's right.
Now, is that just you, or is that?
I think it's high from every mediator. I
Sure.
don't know what the specific percentages are, but I think so. So mediation is the way to go, because just think of how much stress you avoid, how much expense you avoid, how much waiting for a court date, the pre-trial work that you have to do, the actual trial, then an appeal that's sure to come, maybe by both parties. Sometimes it comes back for a new trial. So it's really best to use this alternative dispute resolution. And Russ Lincoln was doing this before the word was even coined. He was mediating boundary disputes with his clients and others. One of the almost scandalous mediation cases involved fornication. Women were charged with adultery, and their reputation was very important to them. So Lincoln would work with the other side to get this restored in a mostly rural area. And so the way you do that is through mediation.
Now, it seems like you took that same approach when you were the Chief Justice and when you were a justice prior to that. It was always to try to get a case solved before, as soon as possible, before it had to clog up the court system or get into the court system.
Exactly.
Sure.
And I did, and Judge Leach does some now on the Superior Court, and I did many in the Superior Court where I was before I became chief. We would line up the cases and give the parties a chance to mediate with me or another mediator, and if that didn't work, then we tee up for trial, but most of them were resolved.
Sure. You've taken on, since your retirement, recent years, you've taken on some pretty high-profile cases and tried to mediate them. I think you just mentioned the Hewlett-Packard case.
Right.
I think that's been successful.
Right.
Another really high-profile case took place right here in Providence, the Providence firefighters dispute with Mayor Elorza.
Right.
Could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, okay. So last summer, I'm invited to help, and there were so many issues because the shifts for our firefighters had been reduced from 4 to 3, and that meant huge overtime expense for the city.
Right.
And it meant less of a family life for the firefighters.
Okay.
And they're there when we need them.
They are.
I'm very high on them.
I think most people agree.
Along with other public safety employees. So how to handle this, Russ?
Because the mayor wanted to save money for the taxpayers.
Exactly. But
he wasn't doing it just
But I
to,
think it wound up costing money.
Sounds like
I didn't have I don't have the numbers, and then it was all the angst between the firefighters and the administration. And so how do we approach this? Because you have 18 grievances in 2 arbitrations when I come on board, 2 appeals in my court, the Supreme Court, 2 U.S. District Court cases. So this is humongous. So what we agreed to do was to try to get many of them rolled into a new collective bargaining agreement. And that's what we concentrated on. So by, I think, September, we had a proposed 5-year collective bargaining agreement that the administration approved, the firefighters approved, on its way to the council because they have to ratify it. They're the ones who appropriate the monies.
Right.
And by December, they had really done that. They had their public hearings and ratified it. Now we have some cleanup work to do.
Okay.
With
It's not over.
with remaining grievances, I am hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can do that, and that the parties will agree. That trauma that we started with last summer, I think, has dissipated greatly.
Sure.
And now the firefighters are back to a 4 shift schedule, and that's given them great morale increases, I think. And now we have to just finish up.
And the deal did help the taxpayers out
I think so.
to an extent, sure.
Yeah, I think so. The
Absolutely.
firefighters had already given up or already had compromised the pension issues 5 years before this
This decision.
collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
So So that was good.
Sure.
That's a good feeling that we were able to do that.
To get both sides, to
Right.
put aside the bad blood, work
Right.
together, come to an agreement.
Right,
Sure.
and Russ, this is not, it's not just the mediator. He or she is the lever or the leverage, but it's a team effort. You've got great counsel on each side. You've got leadership from the union and the administration that's participating. You've got the members themselves. So it takes all of these factions to bring us together.
Sure. In addition to that case, another high-profile case that you worked on, tried to bring to an agreement or a settlement, was the 38 Studios lawsuit.
Right.
Could you talk to your
Right.
your experience in
Well,
that?
okay. Now, and so here's the story. On cases like 38 Studios, which had many tentacles, many parties involved,
Sure, a lot of people being sued.
Yeah, individuals and
Banks,
institutions,
right.
right. So sometimes you don't do it with just one mediator. Now, I was the second mediator,
Okay.
and I worked with Judge Silverstein, who really assigned me to help
Right.
do it. But they wound up resolving everything, which was great, at least civilly, the lawsuits.
Sure.
It took 4 mediators to do it.
And
I
you
was
were
the second
of the 4.
and then Judge Darrigan, and then Bill Paul was the 4th. He wrapped up the last defendant, the last
Sure.
major defendant. So my view is it takes whatever it takes
It
to
sounds
get
like
it done.
like when the Patriots score a touchdown, one play they might hand it to one running back, then the next play they'll give it to another
Exactly.
running back, then they'll throw it to a different receiver.
Exactly.
Sure.
And everyone had a different role, had a different impact on every mediator, that is, had a different approach and a different success pot. And that when I broke it open to at least begin the settlement, then of course the other two were able to, I think, work on that and do their own thing.
Right. One of the things, talking about these mediations that you've spearheaded, that you've worked on, you've come under some criticism in the past for getting paid to do it.
Right.
Now, I know this because sometimes I listen to talk radio and I hear the callers come up and they say, oh my God, Williams is making all this money, and may he rest in peace. But I remember Buddy Cianti's retort to that. He would say, there's nothing more expensive than a cheap lawyer. So I'd like to get,
Yeah.
well, how do you, I mean,
Well,
I assume
okay,
you would
first of
agree
all,
with that assessment.
first of all, as I indicated earlier, Russ, we have this pro bono appellate mediation program for which we charge nothing.
Okay.
All of the mediators there.
Sure.
Now, it's very common for almost universal that professional mediators charge an hourly rate. And I charge an hourly rate, and I reduce it when it involves the state and municipal entities. I discount it for others as well, based on need. But it's the name of the game. And when you think about what's at stake here and what's saved in the final analysis in judgment costs, time, stress, then it's a pretty good deal. So I have no qualms about charging
For
for
a
private
full-
mediation.
for a day's work,
And-
sure.
Right, and the parties know it because they call you to come and help them. And I'm glad to do that.
Sure. Switching gears a little bit, a lot of people think of a Supreme Court justice or a Chief Justice. They think of you listening to cases, asking questions, rendering decisions. But what would you tell people that are watching right now who aren't in the legal profession? What is it about being a Supreme Court justice, in particular the Chief Justice, that they don't know about? In other words, what is Chief Justice Sattel doing? What does Chief Justice Williams do that they don't know? What goes on behind the scenes?
Well, what does go, and I knew this going in, what does go on behind the scenes is the administration burden, and it is a big burden. We have a state court administrator, Joe Baxter, who's a civilian, not a judge or a lawyer, and every court has an administrator.
Okay.
That's a big help. But every court has a chief judge that's also the administrator. But in the Supreme Court, it's a unified judiciary, so the chief is the chief administrator and the chief justice as well. So 60% of my day when I was the chief for about 9 years was spent 7 days a week on administration. And I knew it going in, and
Sure.
we got a lot done, new courthouses, security, improvements of older courthouses, budget independence with the legislature, and the fact that we keep fighting for judicial independence because we are a co-equal branch
Sure.
with the legislature and the executive, the governor.
Governor.
But we got along. I mean, the whole idea was to matriculate with each other, overlap with each other,
Sure.
and that may be something that our listeners and viewers don't understand.
It's interesting that you talk about judicial independence, because I remember back in, I'm going to say it was 2008, Governor Kachiri decided that he wanted to furlough state government. It might have been 2007, it was one of those years. And he wanted to do a furlough, and he said, and you're all going to do it. Everyone's going to do it. The Treasury's going to do it. The Attorney General's going to do it. And the courts are going to do it. And I remember you said, well, hold on here. You said, we've got independence. We're clogged up as it is. If we start furloughing workers, this is going to fall apart. Could you speak to that?
Well, it's amazing you remember this, but I remember it very well. And this was not a reflection on the governor
No.
at the time, but it was a set piece for us to exert our judicial independence, because the Constitution and the statutes really require us to remain open, not closed on one day a week or 4 days a month, even though there's some makeup for employee benefits down the line.
Right.
And the staff didn't want this going, vacancy in work. So I let it be known that we could not do it.
Not that you didn't want to save money, just that you
That's
would
right.
try, but you couldn't do furloughs.
That's right, and I let the governor know about that. Now, saving money, we fight for the budget. We still have to go through the governor's office and then the legislature to get our appropriation each year. But I vowed when I became the chief that we would not overspend the budget. We would not go back for a supplemental, which is what's called for deficits.
Sure.
And we maintain that.
You lived within it.
We lived within it. Despite the hits, depending on the economy, we got by.
Right. All right, well, I'd just be remiss if I didn't ask you one last question. I've got House Majority Leader Joe Shekarchi waiting patiently to come on.
Good man, Joe.
Sure, and as we know right now, the leadership of the House and the Senate is a little bit at loggerheads, but things appear to be getting better. Things appear to be moving towards a solution to the budget standoff. What would you do as a professional mediator to bring this?
Well, first of all, you've got to mediate.
Get
You've
still
got to
close.
agree to mediate.
Sure.
But, and there are different forms of mediation. Getting the people in a room, individual conferences, caucuses we call them, phone calls, whatever it takes to bring the parties together. Now, both of these leaders are very good, and they're acquaintances, and I consider them friends, fellow professionals.
Sure.
And sometimes in a democracy, this happens. And I'm pleased to learn that there's an effort, and they're very close to a resolution, because without a budget, it affects towns and cities on sending tax bills out, and
It affects courts, right?
Affects the
New
courts.
judges.
Right, new judges. So I think what they're doing is the right thing. The sooner the better.
Talking is always better than not
Yes.
talking.
It's communication, isn't it, Russ?
Sure.
Right.
I think Lincoln would be proud.
Yes, and
All
he'd
right.
be right in the middle of it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on and talking about this awesome donation that you've made to Mississippi State and
Thank
what
you.
you've been up to.
Yeah,
You're a good
thank
guy
you.
for coming in. Really appreciate
All
it.
right, Russ,
All right.
anytime.
Thank
Thanks
you,
a
Judge.
lot. Good luck to you.